Out to Southeast Asia. I spent the last 7 years in London, working for a wide range of different companies. The last 1.5 years has been over at Lazada, trying to build a stronger, better UX practice for the region. So, a little bit about my background as well. So actually, I don't know if any of you remember the thing in the top left here. So this is something from the DOS days. So it's called QBasic. So when I was about 10 years old, I printed out a gigantic manual of programming QBasic. It's a very primitive programming language. Literally, you could probably learn how to do the basics of that in about half a day. But for me, that was a really interesting challenge to kind of dive deeper into my curiosity around technology, how technology works, what we can do with technology. I also quickly figured out that actually developing wasn't really my biggest passion, but it was more around figuring out how stuff works. So over from that, we have web radio broken apart. That is not my effort. That is something I've stolen from Google. But the same curiosity I applied to hardware as well. So those interested in taking things apart as a child and figuring out, why things are the way they are, how do they work together, what does it all mean? And then quite often I would struggle to put it back together. So hence broken radio, right? Usually complex, something will jump out and you'll lose a piece, a really important piece. So after going through that journey of diving deeper into the technology, the hardware, all the complicated wiring stuff, I actually got more interested in another side of technology, which is the human side, basically. So very often in high school, university, and all throughout the years later, I was spending a lot of time building things, testing things, breaking things. And then a lot of friends or family would come up to me and say, oh, I really don't understand how to do this, but you understand it all, right? Can you help me out with this? And I said, yeah, sure, that's fine, that's great. But I became really fascinated in trying to understand why some things are easy for some people, more difficult for other people, right? Where is that gap? Where is that difference? Where does that come from, right? So without realizing it, I was already thinking about design and technology and how people use technology. So that led me to go and study information science, which is really looking at information from kind of 3-4 different lenses. So you could say, well, conceptually, what is information? What is knowledge? What does that mean? Technically, how do you store information? How do you retrieve that information? How do you display that information? For businesses, how do you store and manage content and information and tasks? And then ultimately back to the psychology side, right? So actually, how do people interpret that information? And how can you make it easier to learn or easier to interpret information by changing the way that you design it or you display it? So from that, I went into studying human-computer interaction, which is more just a more specialized focus on that interplay between the humans and the technology. And as part of that as well was a little part of ergonomics, which at the time I thought would be absolutely boring and totally non-relevant to my interests. I was gladly proven wrong, actually, and I think we can all kind of recall, maybe scenarios where you travel abroad and you try to use an ATM, and maybe the design or the layout or the functionality is very different from what you're used to. And even the physical space, right, where you use that technology. Maybe the sun is shining straight onto the screen, you're struggling to read the content. Or maybe you're in Europe in winter and your fingers are really cold, or you're wearing gloves and you're trying to use that thing, right? It all impacts kind of our experience and how we use these devices. So after university, I went and stayed on in London, and I worked across some of the big digital agencies there, some of the big client side, and working across a wide range of different industries, some e-commerce, financial services, travel, and a whole bunch else. So ultimately, I had decided that I'd spent 7 years in London. I figured that was a kind of a good time to wrap up, and I was looking for a new challenge. So one of the interesting challenges I find is the role of culture in projects and in design. So I had originally come out to Singapore for the first UX conference, actually, UXSG. It was a great event, and I could see there was a lot of interest in the market for design. I could see that it's still fairly early as well. So when I came across the role at Lazada, I thought this is a great time to actually come on board to this part of the world and to help drive, the change that design can bring to businesses. So my challenges at Lazada, it started from the context. So e-commerce, I think in Thailand, Lazada is fairly dominant actually, but in the rest of our markets it's not always as dominant. Particularly Indonesia is a very competitive market for us. We have very high competition, and some of those competitors, they only actually operate in one country, which gives them some advantages to be able to move quite quickly. They kind of know their customer base better. So that's, again, challenges for us being regional. Everything we do has to work for 5-6 countries in the region with very different culture, demographics, infrastructure, logistics, everything. And of course, we're part of the Alibaba group, so that gives us certain advantages, also certain disadvantages, but very interesting opportunity for technology. So I'll talk a little bit about my journey from the start until where we are now. As Pete said in the intro, so when I started, there were only 4 designers. 4 designers for a platform that is valued at $3 billion, works across 6 different countries, that it has mobile application, of course websites as well, and not only for the buyer and the customer, but we also have our seller platform actually. So if you want to become a seller, or if you're trying to manage your inventory, your sales, understand what's happening, grow your business, those are all things that we designed for as well. So you can imagine 4 designers was particularly challenging, especially in a business that's trying to grow and expand rapidly. So these are kind of the 3 main things that I've been focusing on this year, starting with building a team from 4 to 14. But today I'll be focusing a little bit around the second pillar here, influencing business, right? I think the role of design is very disruptive, but that means, of course, that you need certain support from the business to do your work in the most effective way possible. So at the start, this is more or less where I came in. So I came in, I had a lot of new people asking who I am, what I'm doing, why I'm there, why I'm asking so many damn questions. And we're actually spread across the region. So the biggest team is in Vietnam, the main business headquarters is Singapore, then we have an office in Bangkok as well. So we're all over the place. And primarily the biggest push was, hey, we need all this stuff, we need it tomorrow, can you just get it done, right? That's a bit painful, especially when you want to come in and build a bit more process and a bit more impact. So ultimately, it always comes down to, we've already promised someone. We've promised the CEO, or we've promised our manager, we've promised our boss, it needs to be done by tomorrow or next week. Let's just make it happen. So this is sort of the expression I had on my face for quite a while at the beginning of my time at Lazada. Kind of frustration, a little bit overwhelmed, trying to figure out from all this sea of noise, how can I trim that down to a bit more calm so that we can get back to actually doing what we do best, which is designing great experiences. So is this familiar to anyone? Do any of you have similar challenges? Yeah? Constant pressure, right, for delivery, getting things out the door, whilst at the same time we're all saying, yeah, but we want to do this thing better and greater, right? Yeah, it's a common challenge. So I'll talk a little bit about how to try and move forward from that and the things that I've tried to do, some of which have worked, not everything has worked. So primarily, I would say also thinking very, very strongly about what strategy actually is and what is UX strategy. How is UX strategy different from just overall business strategy or product strategy? Where is the gap? So for me, I think is asking a lot of questions to yourself, to your team, to other parts of the business. And I would say that strategy is kind of taking a very diverse point of view. So yes, you could have a UX strategy, you could even have a business strategy, but actually there needs to be an overall strategy that kind of unites all these different parts of the organization. Businesses that are structured in a very hierarchical way with a lot of different teams, different departments, if those departments are not talking to each other and they're not working towards the same goals, you'll typically find a lot of challenges in getting things done. So I think it's a good strategy unites different parts of the business. Fundamentally also, of course, you need to understand where the organization wants to go. And when I say organization, that is all those different parts of the business. And understanding the why. I think the why is really, really important. Everyone loves to kind of jump to solutions, jump to ideas, but actually sometimes with the strategy, the focus should be much more on not the what, not the output, but the input. Like, what are we trying to solve, and why are we trying to solve that, right? And if you have a very good articulation of those two things, you can move very quickly afterwards. And strategy is holistic, which is great. I think that's perfect for designers, right? We like to think of the entire experience end to end, from start to finish. And often that's difficult with the deadlines and the pressures, but strategy is also holistic. So that actually presents a great opportunity for us to help get involved with that. This probably is similar to many situations that you've all observed, right? Everyone is kind of pulling for their own interests, right? So the business will say, I just want more money, I want more sales, I want more stuff, right? And we say, we want to create delight, we want to create a beautiful experience. And the PM says, I just want to deliver, I have too much pressure, right? Just get it out, just get it out. And technology is like, I have 50 developers, I need to keep them busy, so give me something to build, to put into development. Of course, every business is unique, but quite often, the core business side is kind of the more dominant player, right? So this is a challenge, and it's common across all different businesses at all different stages and sizes. But of course, the more you can align everyone to pull in the same direction, the more frictionless and effortless things become. So sometimes I joke and I say that the work of a UX designer is a little bit like being a group therapist, in the sense that you witness situations like this where everyone's just saying, I want this thing, I want this thing. And you can say, okay kids, that's great. How can we work together, right? What is our shared kind of common goal? We all want to create great products, right? We all want to create something that has a meaningful impact to the customer and to the business. So how can we do this together whilst acknowledging all your different needs? I think UX is a very big part of that solution, and facilitating those discussions. And the reason is, it's kind of simple, but it's nonetheless, I think, very interesting, right? But everyone typically sits around the table or in a boardroom, right? And we have those discussions, and everyone's thinking of something different. But because we use words, it's very subjective, and everyone's interpreting those words a little bit differently. So you might actually think that you're talking about the same thing. Maybe actually it's something completely different, right? Someone's saying, oh, the shape should be very uniform and clear, and he's thinking a square, and the other person thinking, oh, he's talking about a circle, right? A circle is very uniform. So the quicker and more easily you can bring those differences to light, the quicker you can start to collaborate. And design plays a role there. I think what is also very important in understanding strategy and how to best use strategy is understanding your organization and the level of maturity of the organization. So this is a UX maturity model, but I think the same concept can be applied to all different types of practice, whether it's technology or product or anything else. And really what it's sort of saying, well, here in number one, UX doesn't exist. Basically, it's not even a job in the company. There's no titles of people officially doing anything related to UX. Towards the 2 and the 3, you start to actually have people practicing UX design. You have teams. towards the 5 and the 6, you're really at something like a business that's very design driven, right? Where even CEO level, like C-level people are committed, interested, and supportive of UX design, right? So typically most companies might be somewhere between a 3 and a 4, I would say. But depending on where you are, you face very different challenges as a design practice. And I think back to the discussion around what is UX strategy versus overall strategy. I think largely it depends on where you are here. So if you're in a level 6, if the head of design cannot be in a meeting where they're discussing future product strategy or something like that, that's okay, because everyone has that value built into their work, right? And everyone's thinking, yeah, we should create a great product that works really well and is intuitive. So if you're not there, chances are it will still go fine. But if you're in a sort of level 2, if you as a design leader are not in the room, chances are that technology or delivery or other things really start to dominate the discussion. So it's really important to be there and help kind of nudge and coach those things along and remind everyone of the importance of what we do. So you might be thinking, yeah, but Paul, I just want to design. I just want to create great experiences. And I totally get it. I think we all love being really hands-on and creating beautiful UX design. However, I think there's an important realization that in order to create great design, you need an environment where great design can happen as well. And that's not something that's typically given to us. It's something that we need to work towards together with the larger organization by building support for what we do. And I think it's part of everyone's role. So for me, actually, I think that kind of leadership in terms of design and pushing design forward in an organization, it's something that, yes, it falls to, of course, a leader of a design team. But actually, I would say that it falls to everyone. Everyone in this room, everyone at this conference, everyone doing anything related to design in Thailand or Southeast Asia. We all need to advocate and push for better ways of working that are going to be more impactful, that are going to create better experiences. And then we can really create much stronger influence there. Back to strategy as well, I think it's almost impossible to separate strategy from design. Design is defines what the product is and how it works, right? Which means that design is strategy. Therefore, design is business, right? So if you decide you're a startup and you're creating a product, and you think, okay, the product is going to be this solution here, and it's going to solve that kind of problem. You might do some user testing and find that's not actually a problem that people have at all. But maybe there's a different problem that requires a very different solution, which is really worthwhile solving. Well, that means you're changing overall business strategy, right? You're totally going in a different direction, maybe after a different type of user, different problem, different everything. So we need to uncover opportunities. How can we get more involved? How can we push for more change? And how can we do that effectively? I think the number one thing I've learned, especially at a business like Lazada, e-commerce, right? You can imagine it's very sales-driven, very business-driven in that sense. Data speaks volumes. I would say that there's two types of data, right? There's qualitative data, so user research, ethnographic research, observation work, and quantitative, A/B testing, analytics, surveys, and so on. Both are very important, right? For different reasons. It depends on the type of problem that you're trying to solve. But if you have a conversation, you're getting stuck with a person from the business, a product manager, or even a developer. If you have some data to back up your assumptions, likely you're going to have a better conversation with them, right? It removes more of you from that equation, and it focuses customers. It focuses everyone on actually what's at hand, really, what really matters, and what will really push the business forward. Relationships are also incredibly important. And I would say there's two sides to relationships. There is very strongly the professional, of course, business working relationships, understanding who you need to be working with, both formally and informally, right? So you might have another head of department or a counterpart, like a technology lead. Of course, you need to be working with them. But there's also more informal relationships. So someone who's maybe not in a leading type of role, but maybe they have a lot of influence, maybe they have a lot of knowledge, they've been in that business for a long time, and they can really help guide everyone else and nudge them in the kind of direction that might be a bit more effective. But I think even beyond those formal practices of relationships, actually getting to know who you're working with, especially, we're all going to be working in very cross-functional ways. Designers, developers, data scientists, business people, researchers, etc. We all have different backgrounds, right? Different areas of expertise. But getting to know them as people is really important. I think the more that you can make this less about only the work, but the more that you can have some shared values and common ground, well, right? Of course, doing simple things like grabbing lunch with them, going for a coffee, or meeting up and doing some kind of a meetup event, together with people from different disciplines, I think is really important. And what tends to happen then, you find that actually a lot of the friction moves away, right? So sometimes you might have this conversation with someone in development and say, hey, I really want this animation to be a bit smoother, or I really want this extra use case to still be put in, because I really believe there's a lot of value there for the customer. And they might say, yeah, but I've got deadlines, man, I can't do it, and it's too tight. If you have a strong working relationship with that person, from human to human, as a friend, as a colleague, chances are they might give it a try, right? They might be a bit more willing. And likewise, that works in both directions. So sometimes they might need something really quickly. You might say, man, I'm so busy, but I'll try and put it in, right? And I think it actually makes a really, really big difference. The relationships become more forgiving. So, after relationships, language is very important. We all speak like different dialects. So we have, of course, different actual languages: Thai, English, Italian, French, whatever. But languages within different business domains and languages within different functions. So the language of business, right? They love numbers. Numbers are what makes them tick. That's what really motivates them. That's what they really understand. And if you put maybe a low fidelity wireframe in front of them, they might feel a bit uncomfortable. They might say, I don't really know how to deal with this, but can you tell me what it will do in terms of metrics? What will it help me achieve? What will it help me push, right? Is it going to likely improve my sales or my conversions, the click-through rates? That's a bit more aligned to their way of talking. Technology product managers, likewise, they have their own, very own dialects, their own ways of speaking. So understanding who you're with and then tailoring your language to speak their dialect can again help make things a lot smoother, a lot easier, right? So I think for designers, when we present work or we're pitching work, we can talk a lot about, hey, we're using progressive disclosure here, and we're using this design technique there, et cetera, et cetera. But if your audience is largely business people, maybe it won't come across as well. Maybe they'll get a bit defensive, right? So actually, we could shy away from the using the technical words and go to something a bit more human, right? And say, hey, this will help you achieve this objective that you're working towards with this project. Output, of course, we have to deliver great work. We really need to push the boundaries and show that, hey, what we're all trying to do essentially when we're building a design practice, we're trying to push the boundaries, right? Pushing the boundaries means change. Change for an organization in terms of how you work. Change for an organization in terms of what you deliver and how you deliver that. And change is tough. People don't like change, right? Change aversion. People just get frustrated. Like how when Facebook is moving things around, people might be frustrated for a little while and then they forget, right? It's fine. So just delivering great work, super crucial. That will help to win a lot of trust. And then, of course, great design doesn't only look great, work great, feel great, but it has to demonstrate an impact. So it comes back to the numbers side, right? So creating this beautiful, elegant experience, you go back to your cross-functional team and say, this is the concept we've come up with, this is the process we went through, this is where we ended up. We believe it's going to accomplish X, Y, and Z for the business and for this project. Now let's go and test it and validate that. Right? And you build that success case so you can tangibly point at it and say, hey, this is exactly what we did. We expected this outcome. Maybe it didn't work, right? Or maybe it did. Maybe you have to course correct and iterate a few times. But coming back to the numbers is really important. And one thing that I stress a lot to my team in Lazada, and I think it applies in many places, typically product managers are closer to the numbers, right? They're working with analytics experts or they're doing some of that stuff themselves. We can't expect, I think, as designers, that everyone's going to come to us and say, "Oh, here's all the results from the concept that you created, and we tested it, right? And it didn't work, or it did work." I think we need to take more of that ownership ourselves and essentially help chase up, stay on top of, keep track of everything we're doing and we're learning, so that we can start to have those conversations ourselves, right? Together with the business people. We don't need to use product managers or other people as a proxy for having those discussions. Impact is absolutely crucial to building trust. So those are, I think, all fairly kind of tangible business aspects of what we do. But I think as design, we also have a role to sort of lead and inspire people, right? So I've been part of quite a lot of projects where we've actually moved off of a legacy platform onto a completely new platform, where we've done a completely brand new redesign of a tool. And then that's quite interesting. It's interesting for a couple of reasons, because at the first stage of those kind of projects, everyone's very apprehensive, right? There's a lot of risk. You're doing something very new. You're doing that with dozens of people. There's a lot of unknowns, right? What's the scope? What's the timeline? How are we going to deliver? What are we going to do exactly? But the powerful thing of design is it's going to inspire people, right? When you create that first concept and you show people that new concept, that can really motivate people and help that alignment, help getting people working towards the same thing, beyond just a functional. So I think that's something that actually is really important for all of us to do. So if I go back a little bit to the cost of a poor strategy, or a lack of strategy perhaps, there's a lot of questions there. I think very common scenario, and we've encountered it a lot at Lazada. We built something, and we had to get it out the door so fast that actually a lot of the good parts were cut out because of the timelines. So we have to rebuild it. Oh, it actually had no impact. It didn't deliver value for the customer. We've got to rebuild it again. And of course, throughout that process, people get a bit frustrated. You might even lose some people. Satisfaction kind of starts to drop, right? I think within teams. And the worst of all, you end up with a poor product. You might make 3 or 4 iterations by that time, but the end result still doesn't actually work that great. Maybe it does better than the first iteration, but it's still not great. So yeah, that's a tough one. And obviously, the end result of that, back to the other types of roles in the organization, business won't be happy, right? So the business, they have a money-making machine, right? So in e-commerce, they're making sales. That's great. It makes them a ton of money. But then they're spending money on product development, design, testing, QA, etc. And if they don't see us building the numbers higher, then we're just costing them money actually, right? We're not making them more money. And we're wasting a lot of time, people are getting very frustrated. So overall, it's not a very good place to be without a strategy. And typically, you can easily end up with kind of half-finished products that just kind of look like this unbuilt building that could just either be completely shut down, or maybe they kind of live on in your product realm as this kind of half-baked thing. Not good, not good. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the personal challenges that I had So I have three examples from three different parts of the business. Talk a little bit about how that journey went and where we've gotten to so far. So customer experience might be a little bit different in every business. In Lazada, customer experience is focused a lot around, of course, keeping people happy, keeping customers happy, making sure there are no complaints, they get their products on time, that they rate us highly, they're going to tell their friends about us, so that ultimately we can sell more stuff, right, to them and everyone else. So we had a new head of CX that joined relatively around the same time as me, actually. Relatively big guy. He worked at Amazon for a very long time, and he's a Spanish guy, and he has a very, very strong opinion on many, many, many different things. Not only around CX topics, but also around UX and design and technology and all kinds of areas. So we had a bit of a bumpy road with him. So to paint you the scenario, me and my team were based in Vietnam, in Ho Chi Minh City. Our head of CX was in Singapore, right? And predominantly the parts of the product that he really cares about are actually the heart of our product. So product detail pages, for example, shopping cart, checkout, and tracking orders. It's actually the bulk of what we do. So my very first few weeks were on very, very long Skype video calls with him and a bunch of other people, where they would look at our design work and say, hey, but actually I think it should be totally different. This button should be there, that should not be a button, that should be a link, and this should be something else, and this should interact in another way. It was very, very, very painful at the first point in time. So some of the things that we tried to do actually is, one, provide more leadership, right? Make sure that whenever he was on a call, especially at the beginning, I was always there. Me and the most senior designer from my team were always there, right? Clearly presenting our rationale. You know, this is why we did that, that's why we did that. We have data that tells us about this, so that's why we have this here. And really making sure that we come prepared and we have a very good story to tell so we can really sell that design. And of course, keep an open mind, right? If there's something we didn't think about that makes sense, we'll take on his feedback. But kind of setting that boundary to say, hey, we've done our homework, right? That was a very big part of it. The second part, I would say, spending time with him. So flying out to Singapore, doing a lot of sessions with him, whether it's over coffee, over lunch, or just project related. Trying to take the tension out of that relationship. He had just joined, he had a lot of pressure for delivery on certain aspects of his work. So actually trying to help him see, okay, I understand what you're trying to do, and I understand the pressure you have, right? But try and see our side as well, and try and meet in the middle. Lastly, and I think this is one of the things that had possibly the most amount of impact for us actually was doing a lot of workshops. Workshops with him, with his team. So we started doing a lot of design thinking facilitation, getting outside of the projects, getting outside of the deadline work, and actually thinking about overall, actually what are some areas that we can uncover to build more trust, to show that we're not just only looking at delivering what's being asked of us now, we're actually helping him to see other areas that he hasn't thought about yet, right? Or the CX team hasn't thought about exploring yet, and thinking that, hey, maybe we should incorporate some of that stuff in the next round of work. And again, that helps to build trust, it helps to build forward momentum. It's been very, very impactful. So where did we end up with our head of CX? It's a very interesting place. It took many, many, many different months of all these different techniques and things to put together. So I would say probably about 5 months maybe of solid, tough work before we got to where we are. He's now actually our biggest advocate in the company. So on the C-level, he's always standing up for us, he's helping us, getting more support for doing things with a better process, and running more of the design thinking workshops with other C-levels. So it's actually a really, really great success so far, but it was not easy. User research is perhaps one of the most difficult actually topics for us at Lazada. There's a few reasons for that. We're spread around the region, right? So all 6 Southeast Asian markets. We have teams based across the region, but actually the regions that matter most to us are where we do not have teams. So Indonesia is very important for us, as is Thailand and Malaysia and Vietnam. But we actually started from having a user research team that actually hadn't done great work before. So what that meant is that organizationally we lost trust with some people, and by losing trust in our work, we'd actually lost faith, right? Lost support to doing more research, more testing. So how do you recover from that? I have to say it was actually one of the most difficult challenges. We spent about 6 months trying to find another researcher that can really help push us to the next level. From that, we actually did 2 things. One is getting away from doing tests that were not so meaningful and impactful. So believe it or not, sometimes we'd have requests that would be like, hey, can we A/B test banner height 500 pixels versus 510 pixels high? And say, that's great, and maybe we could test it, but maybe it's less important than some other things we could be doing. You know, everyone has a limit on time and effort they can put into stuff, right? So you need to prioritize and really kind of have a good view on what really matters and what's really going to push forward. So that was the first part, trying to get rid of some of the noise and get more impactful stuff coming in, especially on the quantitative side. But for the design practice, what we really want is more qualitative. We want to understand more about why. Why are our designs not doing as well as we think they should, right? How is the Thai market so different from the Vietnamese market or the Indonesian market? And what's different for our users there? Is it a cultural thing? Is it a language thing? Is it where they are using our mobile application? Could be many of those things. Doing that in practice is difficult though. You can imagine under tight timelines, hey, you've got 2 weeks to deliver this project, and you say, yeah, but we're really not sure this is going to work well, let's validate it, let's test that with customers. Well, chances are you're not going to have time to write your entire research script, recruit participants, fly out to Indonesia, do all that, research and testing sessions, then translate, of course, because it's all different languages, translate those results back into English, which is our kind of common language, and then make sure that you get that before the next round of design. Chances are that's going to be a very, very difficult task. So we did 2 things primarily there. One, a lot more guerrilla testing stuff, which is not perfect, but it helps sometimes in a pinch where we need a little bit of validation. It has also really helped our designers to get a bit more empathy for our customers, right? And realize it's not about us, it's about our end customer. And our end customer is very different than who we are. So my team is very mixed. So we have people from Thailand, we have people from Vietnam, Philippines, Singapore, some from outside the region as well. But nonetheless, we all have our biases. We know the business very well, we know the product very well. We spend so much time looking at it that actually using ourselves as test participants, it's a bit too easy, right? So we really need to get people from out in the streets and test for them. If we can make it work for them, it'll work for everyone. So that's been really good, and we can do that very rapidly, very quickly, and thankfully we have enough native speakers. When it comes to the bigger work, we tried a very long time to actually do a bunch of this kind of qualitative validation before going into development, and it has actually proven to be very difficult for us because of the logistics. So what we're doing a bit more nowadays is actually go into a very lean MVP, get it into development, and that gives us more time to actually then go test and answer more targeted questions with our customers. Once we have a bit of analytics as well to help say, okay, well, we think there's some issues here in these 2 areas. Okay, let's go deeper and ask more around the why. Why is that happening? What's going wrong for our customers? And that's again, it's been a more flexible model for us, these 2 approaches. So where are we now? You know, a year and a half after starting to do a kind of new way of using user research, we're now in a much better place. For the first time, actually 2 months back, I went out to Singapore. We presented a bunch of work we did around a chatbot that we created. And we actually found surprisingly tremendous differences for our different markets. So we tested in the Philippines, we tested in Thailand, we tested in Vietnam and Malaysia for our chatbot. Recruiting participants from all those different countries, getting them all in, getting them using the prototype. And we discovered so many issues we didn't think there were there. So very, very interesting. When we played that back to our senior management, which includes even our company CEO, they actually realized this. They were like, why are we not doing more of this stuff? This is great. I said, yeah, it is great, right? We've been pushing for this for a long time. So I think now we're starting to get more of that support. And actually we're going to be hiring a lot more user researchers in the future. So I think that's going to be a tremendous addition. And I think overall the company is shifting to more data-driven work in general, both quantitative and qualitative. So I think it's really a fantastic accomplishment. Lastly, however, commercial. So commercial team for us has been the most difficult part of what we do, and probably the biggest obstacle between us and doing the best work that we could possibly do. So what is commercial actually? Commercial in the Lazada context is a team that ultimately is responsible for sales, for conversion. They own the homepage from a business stakeholder perspective. They own product detail pages. They own search. They own all of that upfront stuff that is so important to getting our customers to actually find the right product. And numbers are really, the number one focus for the commercial guys. They want to see everything tick up every month. Should be increasing. If there's ever a drop, they can sometimes freak out a little bit. So our head of commercial is an Italian guy. He's been out in Asia for over a decade. He's got a lot of experience here, but he hasn't really worked with product management, design, research very much, or at all actually, in his previous roles. So it presented us with a lot of challenges, right? Again, the timelines always very, very tough. Particularly with the commercial team, the strategy of projects was not always thought through as well as it should have done. So what we found is there's a lot of, hey, let's do this thing, let's do that thing. And then you realize that actually the second project that comes in 3 months later is almost opposite to the objectives of the first project that came in, right? So by that point, you've actually spent a lot of time, a lot of energy trying to design and build something only for the company to change direction. So that's tough, and it's fairly common, I guess, in startup world. But nonetheless, if you can get better strategy, better articulation of objectives, of course you can work more effectively. So what are the things that we did to help smooth this over? One of them is bringing in more design thinking techniques. So there's actually very little articulation of objectives and requirements for most of our commercial projects at the start. So actually just sitting down with these guys and saying, actually, what are you trying to achieve? What do you really want to do? And then they'll say, I want to achieve this thing. I want to put that button there. I want to put that page there. I want to, redesign that page. And say, yeah, but that's not really the objective, though, right? What do you really want to do by building that page or by moving that button? Where are you trying to get to, right? And help us understand that. That's a kind of a long process, and it takes a bit of time to coach that out with people. But slowly, bit by bit, you start to get there. So, where are we now? I would say we're very far from where I want to be with the commercial team, actually. I think we've managed to overcome some obstacles and some hurdles, but there's still a very long way to go. The things that have won us the most amount of trust, the most gains, is moving faster, using much more data, and sort of trying to anticipate their needs long before they even understand their own needs. So actually, with our head of commercial, we don't need to be just one step ahead of him in terms of our thinking and strategy. We need to be sort of 3-4 steps ahead of him. So that by the time he comes back to change his mind 2 months later, we've seen it coming, we've thought about it already, we've anticipated that, and we try and eliminate the chances there as much as possible. And again, here the boundaries between product and UX design leadership become pretty blurry sometimes. But it's obviously a big team effort. So commercial's still a long way to go, but I think it's on the right track now. So these are some of the obstacles and challenges that we've had in this last year and a half. There will always be challenges. There will always be people that come from a different perspective, that don't have as much background in understanding UX, methodologies, practice, design, even product. So I think it's natural. And so I think we need to be quite resilient actually in just embracing that change, embracing those challenges, and then making sure that we keep our eyes focused on the prize, what we're really trying to achieve. So yeah, actually I wonder about all of your organizations, right? What kind of challenges you face. Anything familiar, maybe something very different. Maybe it's a structural issue in the company. Maybe it's a certain personality types. It could be a whole host of different things, right, that stand in your way. And I think, although I would love to say, hey, here's the magical 10 things you should do and everything will be perfect, I think that's a thing that's a bit too tough. Every company is so different, right? Different levels of maturity, different cultural practice of how you work together, different personality types, different backgrounds, different industries maybe. So I think it's very hard to actually give one kind of key list of things you could do. But I'll try. I think, yeah, actually the five things that I really would say, really focus on these things. Focus especially on relationships. Relationships, I think, they could well be the very most important thing we do. Understand your product manager, understand your developers, understand your business sponsors or business stakeholders. Make sure that they know that you're on their side, you're trying to help them get stuff done. But, of course, we have a certain way of working, right? And so we need to kind of change and evolve and try new things. And hopefully you have an organization where they're open-minded enough to say, hey, let's give it a go, right? And if it works, then you come back to data. And the data will help show that actually, hey, it worked or it didn't work. Let's try again, let's do something different. And keep experimenting. Speaking your user's language, I think again, helps to build those relationships. So understanding who they are, their backgrounds, what they're trying to achieve, and then make sure that we communicate in a way that they're open to, right? I think that's very important to becoming a great communicator, especially as design. We need to sell our work, we need to pitch our work, we need to present it. Whether you're in an agency or even in the client side, it's a very similar dynamic sometimes, right? They're the project owners, we're executing their vision, but sometimes we have to shape the vision in a different way. So hey, this is what we've done, this is why we've done it, this is why we think it's going to be great. Hence, let's please move forward, right? Delivering great work with great output. You can have all of these above, but if you don't have great output, ultimately it still won't work. And you need to show that that work actually has impact. Without the impact, again, all the other things, they don't really work. So those are kind of my five simple items to think about, really, and explore. So I just want to leave with a couple of thoughts around again, design and what we're here to do. But I would say, every company is a bit different. In Lazada, certainly, we don't like hierarchy that much, even though we have a lot of hierarchy. So we have a lot of management layers, and we have a lot of people managing other teams, and then teams actually executing work. But I think actually the most important thing that you can do as a designer is work bottom up, right? Don't focus on top-down hierarchy. Oh, the leader said this, so let's do everything that he said in that way. I think the leader can never have enough context, right? Because they're not in the project full time as someone executing that work. So finding a purpose, right? Together with your team, together with your fellow designers, UX researchers, everyone else. It's like, hey, we really believe that in order to make this market, to win this market, we need to create a great product. To make that great product, we believe we need to work in a different way, we need to experiment more, we need to collaborate in a different style, whatever that might be. So find that purpose, right? I think it's really crucial. And it can come from a leader, but it doesn't need to. I think that's really important. And then once you've found that purpose, I think we need to believe in the change. We need to believe in the change and actually help create that change. Change is very difficult. We've seen a lot of change at Lazada, but also in London. When I worked for HSBC Regional, this is a 140,000 people organization. It's enormous. And we created a new startup within that bank. Many people within that bank, they'd been there their entire professional career. They joined the graduate program when they were 18 years old, just out of high school or out of university. And 40 years later, they're still there, right? You can imagine they have a certain mindset about this is how we work, this is how we do things, right? These are our practices, our processes. Some of which are quite outdated and old school by today's standards, especially in technology. Bringing that culture change and that mindset shift of how things used to be done, to trying something fresh and new from a different perspective, is tough, but actually is really important. So I would say, for everyone here, not only leaders, but everyone, absolutely everyone here, believe in that change and help bring that change that organizations need. And when we sat together and we pushed for all that stuff together, we can really make it happen and make it happen really quick. And we all know it's the right thing to do. So support each other, support your leaders, support your team members and even other teams, and build bridges. The more bridges we can build, I think the more impactful that we can be. So that is kind of towards the end of my talk. I personally still have many different questions around strategy, around doing design in a more impactful way. But I think I might have a few minutes left, so if anyone has a question.
Anyone has any questions? There we go.
Hi. I would say that a lot of companies in Thailand have this same issue of hierarchy thing. The thing is that a lot of the people, including the design team, they have to listen to their superior. So how would you suggest these people to make change? How would their superior listen to them? What would be your suggestion?
That is a great question, and of course I'm much less familiar with Thai culture than you were, right? So I think in the West, of course, there's some organizations that are also very top-down driven, very strong leadership. The oldest person in the room usually has the kind of vote that counts. I think the easiest answer that I could give you is think clearly about their role, right? What they're trying to achieve. Think about them as a person as well. What's their personality? What makes them tick, right? Everyone has their own traits, right? Some people just have a bias towards, I don't know, really short, quick presentations or answers because they're very busy. Some people, they want really in-depth talks and going through a lot of details. Some people, they love numbers. Some people, they love to hear something totally different, like seeing a video of a user trying to use a product and being totally confused. And sometimes that creates like a light bulb moment. So I would encourage experimenting, I suppose, and trying a lot of different things until you find something that seems to stick. And of course, besides just that person directly, you can think about, okay, well, who else kind of influences that person? Maybe they have someone that's not the CEO, but maybe it's could even be their personal assistant or someone else. But maybe they listen to their input a lot, right? So again, you can build relationships with those people. They can help you to influence kind of the main stakeholder.
guess you mentioned that you're doing some guerrilla testing for the Indonesian market. I was curious if you could talk a little bit more about what guerrilla testing looks like for you guys and kind of some of the specific methodologies that you use. My organization is launching a initiative in Indonesia right now, and I totally feel your pain in terms of like not having feet on the ground in Indonesia. It's like an amazing market opportunity there, but a little bit tough to really understand how the users, what their behaviors are, their needs and motivations.
Yeah, so actually guerrilla testing in Indonesia we have not done. And the reason for that is language. So with our team in Singapore, Vietnam, and Thailand, we have native speakers within the design team for each of those languages. So we could quickly kind of organize something and wrap that up. Indonesia, we need translators, and we've not managed to find any Indonesian Bahasa-speaking researchers, unfortunately. In general, for kind of guerrilla research, what we try to do is, as much as we can, eliminate bias. It's difficult because if I look, for example, here in Bangkok, so our office is in the Biraj Tower next to M Quartier, right? Fantastic shopping mall, it's beautiful, it's great. But is that the core audience that frequents that shopping market? Is that the core audience that we want to test with? Maybe not. You know, maybe that's kind of more towards the top range. Maybe we want to know more what works for kind of the mom and pop shop people, or just everyday office workers. So maybe we need to kind of branch out a little bit, whether it's just going 3 blocks over or to another neighborhood. So yeah, I think just being rapid, being nimble, and trying to remove ourselves from the equation as much as possible. One thing that I've also learned, which is very important for us at Lazada, so 75% of our sales are through mobile, right? So it's overwhelmingly mobile. Depends a bit by country, but overall it's 75. So it's massive. And when we look at Indonesia, the context of use of where people are shopping is particularly interesting. And even in Vietnam sometimes, you might literally have someone driving a motorbike and like using the Lazada app on his other hand, right? It's kind of scary, but it happens, right? People do that. Or someone's sitting in the bus stop with buses and cars honking, all this stuff happening, and they're like just trying to shop for something with the sun going straight on into their screen. And they have left their prescription glasses at home, or maybe they have the wrong prescription glasses. So understanding more of that human side, where are people using our stuff? It's probably not in a perfectly lit environment, in an office, in a quiet space where they can really think clearly and plan everything. It's probably in a kind of messy environment. So yeah, I think that is doing a lot of visits, trying to get on the ground with your designers and just observe a lot of that stuff. Both within a testing session, but also just outside when you're out and about, and just keep your eyes open and see what people are doing. And then of course try and strike up conversations. If you have to use a translator, it's not perfect, but you can still make do.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Paul. Give a hand of applause. I know that there's many questions in the crowd as well. Paul will still be hanging around, right? Yeah. Grab him after the mic. He'll be able to answer and go deeper into more detail, I'm sure. Okay. Well, lunch.